Hi Munchkins, happy Tuesday. Good to see some of you this morning in the Google Meet. Remember, the link to it is at the top of the page. Schedule is Mondays and Wednesdays. We're meeting at 1 p.m. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, we're meeting at 10:30 a.m. So please make sure you try and join us. We'd love to see all your faces. I have more of our book for you today. So we're on chapter 9. Read outside your comfort zone. Later that afternoon, long after Alice and Anne had returned to their own stories, Tilly laid out all her mum's books on the floor in her bedroom like jigsaw pieces from different puzzles. She was determined to try to work out at least a little bit of what Tilliness meant. Oscar's words about missing her mom circled round her head, and she was determined to find some proof that there was more to what was going on than imaginary friends. Whatever it was, Anne's hand in hers had been absolutely real. Tilly studied the books laid out in front of her. They were by different authors from different publishers, and they were different ages and colors. There were adventures and romances, stories about pirates and princesses, and everything in between. If this is really happening, Tilly murmured, then there must be rules. There are always rules for this sort of thing. She looked for another book she had already read and was drawn back again to A Little Princess. You could tell it was a favorite. The cover was coming away from the spine, and there were several rips in the pages. Wondering if she needed to be in the bookshop for whatever was happening to kick in, she headed downstairs to her reading corner and settled herself there. Right, here goes, Tilly said to herself, and opened the book at the first page. She read the first chapter, being sure to pay particular attention to all the details about the main character, Sarah, in case that helped. Then she put the book down and waited. But there was no sign of Sarah and Pages and Company. Okay, maybe I need to read more, Tilly thought, and she began to delve further into the book. But the best part of an hour and several circuits of the bookshop later, there was still no one matching the description of Sarah, or any of the other characters. Tilly tried books she hadn't read, books that were hers, books that were fresh off the shelves, but there was no one even slightly fictional to be found. She felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief that there didn't seem to be anything more magical than her imagination at play. Maybe Oscar had been right after all. Finally, giving up, Tilly went to find Jack and flung herself dramatically into one of the cafe chairs, her head still spinning. All right, Tills? Jack called from behind the counter. That was quite an entrance. I keep telling you that if you stay cooped up in the shop all the time, it'll start getting to you. Tilly blew her bangs out of her eyes in response. Hey, come here. I need some help. Tilly stood and shuffled her way over to see what Jack was concocting. Right, so these are going to be bear paw print brownies, he said, gesturing at a tray of gooey-looking chocolate brownies cut into squares. They're an ode to "We're going on a bear hunt." He held up a square of baking paper with the shape of a paw print cut out of the middle and a tiny sieve. So I'll hold this template on each brownie, and you're going to shake some icing sugar through the sieve, and then hopefully we'll peel it off, and each one will have a sugar paw print right in the middle. Got it? I think so, Tilly said, taking the mini sieve and box of icing sugar Jack was holding. Icing sugar is like powdered sugar. Jack carefully placed the template on the first brownie and nodded to Tilly, who tried to shake some icing sugar into the sieve, but far too much came out and ballooned up, making the air taste sweet around them. Jack grinned. Never mind, that's the test one. We can eat it later to check the brownies. Have another go and maybe shake that box a little slower this time. Tilly gingerly shook the box, managing to get a light sprinkling of sugar through the sieve and onto a brownie. Jack peeled back the baking paper pattern and gave Tilly a triumphant high five, causing another icing sugar cloud. Who's your favorite book character, Jack? Tilly asked him as they worked. Tough question, Tills. And what do you mean by favorite? The character I like the most, or the character I think is the best written? The character you'd most like to be able to have a real-life conversation with, Tilly replied. Oh, well, that's a slightly different question, Jack said. The character I'd most like to talk to... He paused and thought. I think I would be very tempted to go with Long John Silver, the pirate from Treasure Island. Have you read that one? Tilly shook her head. I've seen the Muppet film version, though, she offered. Jack laughed. Well, I think Robert Louis Stevenson's original version is even better. Think of the stories Silver could tell of pirates and buried treasure. Imagine the debates you could have with him. He's a baddie, though, right? Tilly asked. Well, yes, I suppose, technically, but the baddies are more interesting sometimes, don't you think? Or the heroes who aren't always very heroic? People who do the right thing for the wrong reasons, or the wrong thing for the right reasons. People like Long John Silver. You should read the original. And on the page, they have a little skull and crossbones, because it's a pirate story. I was a bit put off by the idea of all the boats. I didn't like Swallows and Amazons, Tilly said. It's not at all like Swallows and Amazons. I reckon you'd enjoy it more than you think. I'm sure your granddad has a fancy way of saying you should read outside your comfort zone. And I agree with him. It was almost closing time, and they were still busy decorating brownies when a sharp cough alerted them to the fact that someone else was there. I'm so sorry, Jack said, looking up and smiling. Just decorating brownies. Bear prints. You see? What can I get you? The man standing in front of Jack did not smile back. He was tall and slender and was wearing a pinstripe suit with a gray bowler hat. His gray tie was held in place with a finely wrought silver tie pin in the shape of an ornate old-fashioned key. In one hand he held a slim black notebook, and in the other a cane. I am looking for Archibald Pages. This is his shop, is it not? The man said abruptly. Jack, who was used to dealing with the occasional rude customer, smiled again. If he's not at the front till, then he's probably at his desk. Is he expecting you? No, the man replied shortly. Tilly, why don't you see if you can find your granddad and ask him if he's free, Jack said, and the man looked properly at Tilly for the first time. You're Archibald's granddaughter? He said, sounding surprised and staring at her intently. Tilly nodded. How interesting, he said. On second thoughts, let me find Archie for you, Mr. Jack paused, waiting for the man to supply his name. Chalk. Enoch Chalk. And I can find my own way, thank you. I've been here before. He nodded curtly and set off toward the stairs. Tilly gave an involuntary shiver as he left. Goodness, I wonder what he wants with Granddad. Oh, probably something boring to do with tax or such like. He looked like an accountant, don't you think? Let's get on with the rest of these brownies. I think I might go and see if Granddad wants a cup of tea, Tilly said. I feel like he might need one. Good idea, Tills. I'll get a pot brewing. There's a picture on the page of what the gentleman might have looked like. Tilly didn't exactly mean to sneak up on them, but she did find herself walking particularly carefully and quietly, staying out of sight of Granddad's desk. Mr. Chalk had made her feel rather strange, and she wanted to know what business he had with Granddad. By the time she reached the desk, their conversation was already heated. Interesting picture at the top of this page. It looks like a person who's upside down. There have been disturbances in the sources, Archibald. Things that few people would notice, but which have not escaped my attention. Enoch, I don't know what you're talking about. You come barging in here talking about disturbances as though it was 10 years ago. I am not part of this anymore, and you know it. Tilly leaned closer to the bookshelf she was hiding behind. I know that you should not be part of this anymore, Archibald, but I also know that you could never resist meddling in things that don't concern you, or turning a blind eye to those that should be dealt with. Enoch, have you not caused enough problems for me and my family that I have to endure you cropping up in my bookshop? Speaking of family, Archibald. But at that moment, Tilly wobbled and, putting her hand out to steady herself, pushed several books out of the other side of the shelf, which rained down by the strange man's feet. I was just checking if you wanted a cup of tea, she tried to say calmly as both men looked up at her and she bent down to pick up the books and hide her red cheeks. No, I am leaving, Chalk said, and with a long stare at Tilly, but without another word, he picked up his notebook and his cane and walked toward the stairs. Who is he? Tilly asked. Granddad's face was white. I used to work with him a long time ago. We weren't the best of friends, as you could probably tell. What did he mean about disturbances? Were you listening to our conversation, Tilly? Granddad said sharply. No, I just sort of overheard some of it as I was coming over to, ask you about the cup of tea. That conversation was private and not for you to worry about. Chalk is an old colleague whom I didn't see eye to eye with, but what's in the past is in the past, Tilly, and you shouldn't spend any more time thinking about it. Just a bit unexpected, that's all. Now, let's have that brew you mentioned. They headed to the cafe in companionable silence, but as Granddad picked up the cup of tea that Jack had poured, Tilly heard the china rattle as his hand shook, even if he did have what was nearly a smile on his face. Chapter 10. Fictional by definition. Your Granddad has used up all the milk again, Grandma said as she opened the fridge. Would you mind popping out to get some from the corner shop? Tilly sighed theatrically. Go on, love. I need some for dinner, and you haven't been outside all day. Get some licorice all sorts for your granddad. You know how much he loves them. And pick something for yourself, too. Tilly resignedly took the 5-pound note that Grandma handed her and ventured outside. Pounds are like dollars in England. Everything that had happened so far that day had left Tilly thirsty for glimpses of magic leaking through into the real world, but the street remained resolutely normal around her. She snuggled deeper into her scarf against the wind, but as she went to pull her gloves out of her coat pocket, she dislodged the 5-pound note that Grandma had given her, and it danced down the pavement in front of her. She set off after it, only to crash into someone standing in the middle of the pavement, with a white sneaker pinning the money down, stopping it from blowing away. Got it, Oscar said, picking up the note and handing it back to Tilly. Thanks, she said, tucking it back in her pocket and hopping from one foot to the other in the cold. I'm just going to get some milk. Tilly paused. Do you want to come? Sure, Oscar said. The memory of their last conversation hung awkwardly between them. Tilly tried to aim for a safe subject as they walked down the street. Did you have a good afternoon? It was fine, Oscar said. Right then, she said, refusing to be the one to make any more effort. Sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, honestly, but nothing really happened after you left is all. Just lots of customers and cake. The usual. Must be amazing having your mom own a cafe, Tilly said, her mood thawing quickly. Almost as good as a bookshop. It's okay, Oscar said. Mom loves it, but I don't think I'd mind if she decided to do something different. I'm not there much since I'm usually in Paris with Dad over the holidays. I remember you said. Do you speak much French? A little bit. Dad used to speak French lots when we were small, but mine gets kind of rusty quickly, and then I feel bad like I get it wrong a lot when I'm in France. My dyslexia doesn't help. It doesn't stick in my brain very well. My dad still has to work a lot when I visit, so I spend quite a bit of time with my French grandma, my mammy. We go to lots of museums and galleries. She used to be an illustrator, and she got me into drawing and art and stuff. Do you have any friends there? Not really. It's kind of hard to meet other kids when you're not in school. There's a boy in our building who I think must be around our age, but he never seems very friendly. My dad invited him over last summer, but he said he couldn't speak any English, even though I'm sure he can. Oscar was interrupted by a loud laugh from across the street, and they both looked up to see a group of girls from their class on the other side of the road. Isn't that Grace? Oscar said. Yeah, I think so, Tilly replied. She's your friend, isn't she? Do you want to say hi? Tilly shrugged. The girls fell about laughing again, and Tilly and Oscar both automatically checked themselves for something stuck in their hair or toilet paper on their shoes. I don't think they're laughing at us, Oscar said, although it came out like a question. I don't think they've even noticed us, Tilly said, but at that moment Grace raised her hand in a sort of shy half-wave before seeming to think better of it and running after the rest of the group. Tilly hoped Grace hadn't seen her start to wave back. So, you're not friends with Grace anymore? Oscar asked. The sound of laughter got quieter as the girls turned the corner. Tilly paused. I don't really know, she said. She tried to explain. It's not like you get a letter of resignation or anything. It's just that it got complicated because of secondary school and the netball team and everything. Girls are weird, Oscar said. Do you really think that? Tilly said, disappointed. No, he replied quickly. But I mean, you can see that it's a bit silly that you and Grace aren't friends because of netball. It's not because of netball, Tilly said. It's because of stuff like netball. And it's not silly. You thinking girls are weird is silly. You know I don't think that at all. I'm sorry, he said. I just don't understand why friendships aren't easier. Why is it so hard to just find someone you like talking to? That should be all there is to it. The problem is that not enough people are best friend material, Tilly said authoritatively, and that's all there is to it. Well, at least you've got your... If you say imaginary friends, I will never speak to you again, Tilly said, staring at him fiercely. But, Tilly, they're from books. They're imaginary by nature. They're fictional by definition. I mean, they are fictional, Tilly said, but they're not imaginary. Anyway, I don't want to talk to you about them. You obviously don't get it. You know what? I have to hurry and get the milk for Grandma so she can make dinner. I'll see you later. Tilly sped past Oscar in a self-conscious blur, leaving him scuffing his heels. 20 minutes later, she thumped the milk down in front of Grandma, who raised her eyebrows. Everything okay? Fine, Tilly said, and stormed off. Tilly, clearly everything is not fine. Come back and tell me what's going on, Grandma called after her. No, leave me alone. I'm going to read, Tilly shouted back, and Grandma let her go. Tilly reached the second floor, stewing in her frustration, and there she found Alice, sitting primly on the sofa. Ah, I've been waiting for you, Alice said, standing up. Would you like to come to a tea party? That's the end for today. Looks sunny but cold out, so try to get a little bit of outside time, friends. And I will see you tomorrow, 1 p.m., for our Google Meet. See you there. Bye.